Happy Wednesday. Okay, Jennifer, it's all yours. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Let's try that again. Good morning, everyone. I believe you're seeing my PowerPoint right now. You should be seeing
Yeah,
that. Great.
yes.
Please let me know in the chat if at any time I freeze. I am in Austin, Texas, and we've had some internet issues the last couple days because the hurricane hit Houston pretty hard. So please just let me know if I'm freezing, and I'll try and get those resolved as quickly as possible. And I apologize for any of that. Um, Candace was nice enough to let me introduce myself. So I've been with AmeriCorps about 22 years now. I'm a Teach for America alum, and I served as a middle school special education teacher on the South Texas-Mexico border. I taught for a couple years with Teach for America and then taught a third year and then became a program director in that same geographic area. I had 100 members, all high school seniors, serving half-time. I say I could do that in my younger days. I have a high schooler myself now at home, and I don't know if I'd want to have a program with 100 of them nowadays. But they all served in after-school programs, and if they had an off period, their local elementary schools. I moved abroad for a couple of years, and then when I came back to the States, I relocated to Austin, Texas, where I currently am, and took over the Communities and Schools of Central Texas AmeriCorps program as the program director. Again, we had about 100 members, a mix of full-time, half-time, quarter-time members serving in high needs Title I schools. And I left that in early 2016 to do full-time consulting. So I work with both operational and planning grantees across the country and also state commissions to do training for their programs. So I'm excited to be here with you all today. This morning, we're talking about National Service Criminal History Check. And I want to make sure all your questions are answered. So please, if you have a question, as I said earlier, any of those options are great to make sure those questions are answered, whether it's raising your hand or putting it in the chat, whatever works best for you all. All right. So just to, you know, let me know, like I said, if you have any questions. Criminal history checks is a pretty heavy topic. A lot of you are new to AmeriCorps or your program is new, and this is a topic that can have some significant cost findings for your program. So we want to make sure that you fully understand how to conduct criminal history checks and not have any of those cost findings. All right. So today we're going to talk about how you can maintain that compliance in this area. So we're going to talk about how to properly utilize AmeriCorps approved NSCHC, and we use a lot of acronyms in AmeriCorps, and that's National Service Criminal History Check vendors and or databases, how to conduct compliant checks for all required positions, and develop and or refine the documents and written policies and procedures to carry out your criminal history check. More and more, the Office of the Inspector General and AmeriCorps are going back to programs, policies, and procedures and verifying that they are being followed and that they are available to them as they're monitoring, because they're going to say, what did your policies and procedures say? So it's really important that you develop those policies and procedures and you follow them. For today, for this morning, we're going to talk about the why, the NSCHC important, what are the positions impacted by NSCHCs, what's overview and components of a compliant check, and whether you're using the AmeriCorps vendors of TruScreen or FieldPrint, or nsopw.gov and the state repositories and fingerprint check. And then what is qualification, non-compliance, and FAQs. Like I said, National Service Criminal History checks are one of the most complicated and involved eligibility criteria, and this area sometimes has a lot of questions. So if we do start getting a ton of questions and we start running out of time, I may just have you hold them, and then I can kind of sit into lunch a little bit and answer those questions, or I can follow up with Candace with answers to those questions. AmeriCorps has a ton of resources available to you in relation to criminal history checks. The website link is listed on this slide, and it's really, really important that you familiarize yourself with this website, bookmark it, and regularly visit it so you can ensure you're accessing the most up-to-date information. It's your responsibility as an AmeriCorps state and national program to be in compliance with the AmeriCorps NSCHC requirements. I'm sure Volunteer Tennessee provides guidance to you if there's changes or anything upcoming in terms of criminal history checks, but ultimately the responsibility falls on you to ensure that you are compliant with any changes or updates that AmeriCorps provides. Let me just, I just want to show you this page really quick too. So you can see there have been some updates lately. You'll see there is a document right here, NSCHC vendor transition FAQs, and it does say when it was last updated. So some of these items towards the bottom have been updated more recently. So again, you want to make sure you have the most up-to-date information available for you. So I suggest bookmarking this page if you haven't already. All right. So why do we have to do criminal history checks? The purpose of the National Service Criminal History Checks is really to protect individuals served by members and program staff, along with protecting those taxpayer dollars. NSCHCs also help protect the integrity of the agencies with AmeriCorps programs and being served by your program. Basically, in the end, we have to show that our tax dollars are being spent with strong due diligence. When we look at who has to undergo a National Service Criminal History check, there's two main groups of individuals that have to undergo a criminal history check. The first is every single AmeriCorps state and national member has to undergo one. And then if you have a cost reimbursement grant, some of you may have a fixed cost grant, but this only applies to cost reimbursement grantees. And it's any individuals listed in the personnel section of your budget. So any individual in that section there has to have a National Service Criminal History check. Individuals who are exempt from a National Service Criminal History check include those under the age of 18 on the first day of service or work. So if they're gonna be under 18 on the first day of service or work, they are exempt from this criminal history check. Also exempt are any staff on fixed amount grants, planning grant staff, and individuals whose activity is entirely included in your program's indirect cost rate, and contractors providing services under a contract as defined under 2 CFR 200.2. Okay. So what does the National Service Criminal History check include? When we're looking at this, we're going to look at the Code of Federal Regulations, oftentimes referred to as the CFRs, and specifically 2540.200 to 2540.207, along with your AmeriCorps grant terms and conditions. Those two documents are really important. Your grant, AmeriCorps grant terms and conditions, there's two documents. There's the AmeriCorps state and national grant terms and conditions, sometimes referred to as the specific terms and conditions. And then there are the general terms and conditions. As every single year, you should be reading through those. They have a section at the top with any changes. But as a program director, I would read that changes section, and I would also go through the entire document, because sometimes I didn't catch things the previous year. I would highlight it. I would make sure I understood everything in that, because that is your terms and conditions, what you are held to for your program. Additionally, there's also the NSCHC frequently asked questions that holds additional guidance, and that is on that webpage that I just showed you a few minutes ago. National Service Criminal History checks are time sensitive and have those significant consequences that we've talked about if you're not compliant. So it's important that you and your staff are fully aware of all of the NSCHC rules and regulations, because being non-compliant, we don't want you to have one of those high cost findings. Oops, wrong button. Let's see there. Okay. When we talk about National Service Criminal History checks, we're talking about 4 different checks that all individuals have to have. These 4 checks include a National Sex Offender Public Website check, a state of service check, a state of residence check, and an FBI fingerprint check. And all of these checks have to be completed and adjudicated by your program at least 1 day prior to start of service or work. Let's talk a little bit more about those state checks. The state component has two different pieces, which means there are potentially two types of state checks that need to be performed. The state of service check is easy. This is the check of the repository in the state where an individual will serve or work. So for you all, that is Tennessee, okay? The state of residence is the location an individual identifies as their place of residence at the time of their application. This is usually indicated by the current residence listed on their application. If you are using the My AmeriCorps application for your members, there is a permanent resident field and a current address field. You're going to go by the current address that they list there. If you're using your own program developed application, I strongly encourage you to have those two different fields, current address and permanent address, because they could be in Tennessee for college and on their application list their parents' address because it's their permanent address in Florida. And if you only have one address box and they've listed Florida there, then now you have to do a state of residence check for Florida. So make it easy on yourself and have those two distinguished fields of current residence and permanent residence. If the state of service and state of residence are the same, then only one state check is required. And if an individual is at the time of application living outside the US, you should run the state of residence check for where they were most recently resided in this state. Okay. There is a section concerning college students in the NSCHC manual from AmeriCorps, excuse me, and it says for the purpose of AmeriCorps requirements, an individual applying to serve or work who is enrolled as a full-time college student is deemed to be residing in the state where they live for the purpose of attending school without regards to whether or not that home is on or off campus and whether or not that home is in the same state as the college is located. So again, like where they are residing at the time of their application. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. So here's a general overview of the required NSCHC components, and we'll discuss how to undertake each of these components in a bit. Your first and last name, you have to have your first and last name used on name-based checks to reflect the legal name of the individual as reflected on the documentation used to verify the identity of the individual. So you have to have some kind of identification to verify the identity of the individual. There are a few items that fall under this component of how you can check that they have, oops, sorry about that, that they have in terms of their legal name. There's a few different components. The first one is a signed I-9, or excuse me, signed W-4 form, okay? The second one is a signed I-9 form. And when do you usually get those? If you can answer in the chat, when do you usually get those documents from AmeriCorps members? A signed W-4 form or a signed I-9 form? Chances at the time of enrollment? Anyone else? When do you get a signed W-4 form and a signed I-9 form? W-4, Rachel said W-4 before day one in most cases, and I-9 within 3 days of their start date. Right. Most of you get those very close to their start date. The problem is you have to have their criminal history checks adjudicated at least 1 day before their start of service. So if you're getting that I-9 and the W-4 too close to service, then you can't use those to verify the individual's name in relation to the criminal history check. when AmeriCorps put this out, it wasn't really clear why they picked those two, but they are there. They are listed there. The third option is the option that most programs go with. And it says any document on the I-9's list of acceptable documents. So if we look at an I-9, pull one up here really quick for you all. If you look at an I-9, what they're talking about is on page 3, there is a list of acceptable documents. Most of these are government issued identification forms like a US passport, social security card, voter registration card, etc. The only one I have a concern with is a school ID card, because on a school ID card, they could have a nickname instead of their legal name. So that's just something to think about in relation to what is acceptable for your program to verify their name in relation to a criminal history check. And you all, again, would indicate what's acceptable in your policies and procedures, right? And then the last option is benefit income documentation from the Social Security Administration, including but not limited to Social Security benefit statement, SSA 1099, supplemental security income documentation, or Social Security disability insurance documentation. It's important to note that hyphens and apostrophes matter when putting in the first and last name for state checks. Okay, capitalization does not matter, but hyphens and apostrophes do matter. Okay. Additionally, if you're presented with documents with different names, you want to make sure that you obtain additional information from the individual to determine the first and last name. And sometimes this is difficult in relation to driver's license or other IDs. It doesn't separate the first name from the middle name. So it's important that you understand what the first name is, the middle name, and the last name, because you should only be checking first and last names, not middle names. Okay. And you need to have a process to reconcile documentation reflecting different names to determine that first and last name to be used on the name-based check. Okay. Because if it's determined that you used the wrong name or you included the middle name, then it could be a cost finding for you. Again, something we want to avoid. All right, so far we've reviewed why and who, so now let's look at what. Here's a general overview of the required National Service Criminal History components. You have to have evidence that all required components, the NSOPW state, both state checks and the FBI checks were conducted and adjudicated on time and considered when making an eligibility determination. You have to have the required components were conducted through AmeriCorps authorized sources and consistent with your program's NSCHC policies and procedures. You have to ensure that the NSOPW results include searches from all states, territories, and Indian tribes. And then you have to ensure that consent documentation from the individual, including understanding that position is contingent upon the organization's review of the National Service Criminal History Check component results, and individuals' understanding of the ability to review and challenge the factual accuracy of the result before action is taken to exclude them. And lastly, documentation that the individual is eligible to serve work if a vendor returns a do not recommend result. And you see there's a question. If you include a middle name, it could result in a finding. If you include a middle name as like in the nsopw.gov search, it asks for first and last name only. So if you include a middle name, like my middle name's Amy, if I include Jennifer Amy as my first name, because that's what it looks like on my driver's license, it doesn't distinguish first and middle. Now I've skewed the result. So yes, it could result in a finding. If you're using TrueScreen, there is a middle name field. If you put the middle name in there, they don't even use it. So it's a waste of time to even type it in. What becomes the finding is if you put the middle name in with the first name, which happens sometimes because it's not clear. Middle name could be in relation to any check, Rachel. So anytime that you're indicating, you have to make sure that you, yes, keep them separate from the first name. That's the catch there. People sometimes don't understand the documentation they're getting. People have hyphenated last names. Some people have multiple first names. So you need to clarify is this your middle name legally, or is this your part of your first name? Does that make sense, everyone? I want to make sure it's clear before I move on. Any other questions on that? Okay, great. All right. So let's review some key NSCHC terms that are important to understand. Completed means that TruScreen or FieldPrint has completed the program ordered checks and provided their adjudication recommendations based on AmeriCorps eligibility requirements. Or the AmeriCorps designated state repository has completed the checks and provided the information to the program. Adjudicated means that the program has reviewed the completed check results and provided a final adjudication based on AmeriCorps and your program's disqualifying offenses. Okay. It's important to note that checks are not considered compliant until the program has adjudicated the results, and all checks have to be adjudicated at least 1 day prior to start of service or work. AmeriCorps only has 4 ways that they say individuals can be disqualified to serve or charge time to an AmeriCorps grant. So a person isn't eligible if they refuse to consent to a National Service Criminal History check, if they make a false statement, which means an individual intentionally provides the following: either a false name, a government issued identification belonging to another person, a false identification, or fingerprints of another individual. In terms of criminal convictions, the only 2 items that are would make an individual ineligible to serve are that they are registered or required to be registered on a sex offender registry, and or they're convicted of murder. And murder specifically, U.S. Code 81111. I'm going to mess this up. It's Wednesday. It's specifically, I think it's 18 U.S. Code 1111, which is first or second degree murder. Okay. These are minimum standards for ineligibility as outlined by AmeriCorps, and your program should include any additional disqualifying offenses in your written policies and procedures that you deem important. If your members are serving vulnerable populations, it's in your best interest to set stricter guidelines, such as disqualifying individuals convicted of felonies or violent acts. It's also important to be aware of your service site disqualifying offenses. We used to run, like I said, we were a school-based program. We placed members across the Central Texas area in various school districts. Most of my school districts, if they knew we ran the checks, they were fine if they met our disqualifying offenses. If they didn't have any of those. I had one school district that ran their own checks, and I had placed a member there, and they did not allow anybody in that school district that had any offenses in the last 10 years. She had a fight or marijuana conviction in middle school, and it had been 9.5 years, and they would not allow her to serve in that district. So now suddenly I'm scrambling to find her a new placement after she has started her service. So it's really important that you're aware of your service site disqualifying offenses and kind of base maybe your program criteria on those too. Suitability is a word that AmeriCorps added when they had some role changes, and suitability for service or work is determined by the program and your site if applicable, like in the situation I just mentioned. An individual may be eligible to serve or work based on AmeriCorps ineligibility criteria, which, as we just said, is just conviction of murder or required or registered on a sex offender registry. So you and your service site can determine that an individual is not suitable to serve or work in a position based on your criteria that you've established in your written policies and procedures. It's also, you have to be consistent with state and federal civil rights and non-discrimination laws, including Title VII and VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and AmeriCorps' implementing regulations under Title VI. Your criteria should be clearly described in your policies and procedures. Additionally, the requirements do not disqualify applicants on the basis of arrest. In certain states, there's actually legal constraints in how an arrest record can be considered, and some statewide criminal repositories do not include arrest information in the records they release. EEOC provides guidance outlining that programs should be mindful that arrests alone are mere allegations and that actual criminal convictions or actual evidence of conduct underlying arrest are the relevant indicators of a person's suitability or, in some cases, eligibility to serve or work. If the criminal history check returns results beyond AmeriCorps' disqualifying offenses, again, murder and sex offender registry, you have the discretion, subject to any federal civil rights law and state law requirements, to decide if the results of that criminal history background check disqualify someone from service or work. You should consider the factors set forth in the EEOC's guidance under Title VII, including the nature and gravity of the offense, the time that's passed since the conviction or completion of the sentence, the number of offenses, age at the time of offense, and nature of the position. Okay? You have to have your disqualifying criteria in your written policies and procedures, and you have to be consistent on how those criteria are applied. Okay? You also need to use National Service Criminal History Check results in combination with other information obtained through your selection process to make an informed choice before selecting an individual for service or work. Again, you should maintain documentation that you utilize in making suitability determinations for individuals with convictions. There also is a federal reentry policy which aims to reduce post-prison barriers to employment. So participating in national service programs funded by AmeriCorps could really help individuals who've been in prison successfully reenter society. So AmeriCorps encourages programs to minimize barriers to service for individuals who've formerly been incarcerated who are eligible based on the criminal history check regulations and your suitability criteria without putting your beneficiaries at genuine risk. So how do you determine suitability criteria? I've seen programs just list offenses that would disqualify someone, but criminal history checks are really complicated. So an offense list didn't really work when I was a program director. It was more, like we said, like the EEOC criteria, these items here, the second bullet, that we took into consideration. So this was our flow chart in consideration of disqualifying offenses. For example, if an individual had a felony conviction, they were automatically denied. And that was in alignment with our school district and what their policies were around criminal history checks. But if they had a misdemeanor and it occurred between 5 and 10 years ago, it was marked review. And review meant that I reviewed those results as the program director. I filled out a form indicating what the offenses were and whether I thought they should be cleared to serve or not cleared to serve and why. And then our CEO reviewed that form along with their criminal history information and made the final decision. Sometimes our CEO called the individual in to get more information. Sometimes it's not really clear what the actual offense was. I had something come through and I was like, I have no idea what this actually was. And we ended up asking the individual, and he had streaked across his college campus. So he'd gotten a charge for that, but it wasn't clear based on the conviction listed, the offense, what he had actually done. So you never know. So it's always important to have this flow chart is great. You'll notice the flow chart does have deferred adjudication, and AmeriCorps says convictions, not arrest. And deferred adjudication is kind of in that gray area. And I went down a rabbit hole once looking at different states, different laws in different states, of course. The problem with the deferred adjudication is, for instance, if you accept someone who's on deferred adjudication for a felony, and you would normally deny an individual with a felony the opportunity to serve in your program, the issue becomes if they are on deferred adjudication and they do not meet their requirements for the court and they break their orders, then that is switched to a felony conviction. And so now you have someone serving who has a felony conviction in your program, which is not in alignment with your criminal history policies and procedures. Okay.
There are
Perfect timing.
there's a
I'm seeing
question
lots of
in the chat.
questions in the
Okay.
chat. Our background checks automatically run for the state you say you're in a sub-grant for in TrueScreen, or do we need to be ordering multiple separate checks if they are coming from out of state? So Mary, in TrueScreen, when you do an order, you're indicating you're a subgrantee of Tennessee, and that gives Tennessee access to that when they're monitoring, but you are responsible for ordering what checks you need. So if they are coming from out of state, then you would need to order Tennessee and that state.
So to be clear,
Also,
we need to order, so we need to be ordering two completely separate TrueScreen
you can do it in the
checks.
same order, and I'm going to show you the TrueScreen.
Okay.
It's a little confusing when you have to order two state checks. It's not super clear in the order form how to do it, but you can put it all under one order, but you would have to order both checks. Okay. So as far as college, what AmeriCorps is saying for college is that you don't have to use their home state. If they're living, like say, if they're living in Texas, like they're going to serve in a Texas AmeriCorps program and they're living in Texas for college, then you're going to use that as their state of residence. You only have to do one check. So what it's saying is you don't have to use their home state, even though we know that college residency is technically temporary for the most part. Like I came to Texas for college, I maintained my Florida driver's license, right? My permanent residence was still in Florida, but for AmeriCorps purposes, you would do a Texas state of residence check on me because I'm residing in Texas for college. And I would put that address as my current address, most likely on an application. So whatever your policies and procedures are, if you just say, we are establishing state of residence based on the current address listed on their application, you're covered. Okay. Does that make sense?
I think so. I guess if somebody like is from Florida and went to Texas for college, but then is coming to Tennessee for their service, but I'm seeing in the chat that I don't need to do a Tennessee one because Jan is explaining NFF, which I will look into.
Right. Yeah, which we're going to talk about. Yeah. So it like I went to college many years ago. You wouldn't look at my state I went to college at. It's if they're a current college student and they're residing in that state for college. That's what I'm saying. Like the easiest way to do it is just look at say your policy and procedure is you look at the current state or the current address that they've listed. 9 times out of 10, they're going to list their college address and you're covered there. You're covered, period. If your policies and procedures just say, we are just going by the current address on their application, period. Okay.
Can I ask something about that? We do have a college program. Sometimes they will apply from home. So we could include in our policy that they are covered as part of Tennessee if they attend school in Tennessee.
Yeah, you'd have to be able to prove that somehow.
Okay, great, thank you.
I mean, and then you could change, like instead of current address, you could say college address, like college residence address or something like that.
On our individual application, okay.
Yeah, do you have a current address in a permanent address field?
We typically, I think we'll probably just continue to go off of the eGrants application. We get an application and then we have them fill out the eGrants application because enrollment's easier. So
yeah. And maybe it's in your instructions for applying. Current address should be the address that if they're attending college in Tennessee, the address that they're residing in for college.
Okay, thank you. That's a good idea.
Yeah. All right, any other questions? All right, let's start diving into where you're going to undertake these checks. You have 3 options in the state of Tennessee. Not all states provide you this option in case you move to another state and run an AmeriCorps program there. But Tennessee gives you autonomy to choose which direction you want to go. Option 1 is AmeriCorps approved vendors. AmeriCorps back in 2019 developed a process for you as a grantee to conduct background checks through these AmeriCorps approved vendors. The vendors are TruScreen for the NSOPW, and that's the National Sex Offender Public website. If I say an acronym and I forget to say it out and you aren't sure what it is, please ask. So TruScreen does the NSOPW and the state checks, and FieldPrint conducts the FBI fingerprint check. Under the AmeriCorps agreement with these two vendors, AmeriCorps ensures high compliance on your background checks, but it's important to note that if you use these vendors, it has to be done under the AmeriCorps agreement to experience those benefits, and that these are the only vendors AmeriCorps has approved and that meet all AmeriCorps National Service Criminal History Check requirements. I talked to a lot of brand new programs. They're like, oh, we already run background checks. We run it through Verify or whatever it is. And those do not meet the requirements for AmeriCorps purposes, and it would be a cost finding. So TruScreen and FieldPrint are the only approved vendors for National Service Criminal History checks. Your second option, in the event you choose not to use TruScreen and FieldPrint, is you would need to utilize the nsopw.gov website for the NSOPW and the AmeriCorps state designated repositories for the state check and the FBI fingerprint check. And then option 3 is you have the option of utilizing a combination of 1 and 2. So for example, you could utilize the nsopw.gov website for the NSOPW check, the AmeriCorps state designated repository for the state check, and FieldPrint for the FBI fingerprint check. Okay. It's important to note that the timeline and documentation vary based on what option is chosen. So it's important that you understand these for whatever process you undertake. Just really quickly in the chat, how many of you utilize, if you can just put what option you utilize, what number, like 1, 2, or 3. So 1 is the approved vendors, 2 is the nsopw.gov and state repositories, and 3 is a combination of both. It looks like everyone is doing TruScreen and FieldPrint. Great. All right. Well, that will make today a little bit easier. All right, so let's start with TruScreen. We may not get all the way through TruScreen before our break time, but we'll see how far we get. As I said, checks have to be completed under the AmeriCorps agreement to experience the full compliance benefits. So whenever whoever sets up your account, they need to make sure it's under the CNCS or AmeriCorps agreement. TruScreen documents a number of the National Service Criminal History Check requirements, including the following: a copy of the documentation from you to determine the first and last name of the individual that will obtain the most accurate criminal history records, the individual's consent to perform the check, their understanding that selections based on the results. It informs them of their ability to challenge the factual accuracy of the results before action is taken to exclude them. It includes their anticipated start date, their state of residence at time of application, date of service, final adjudication decision, and a timestamp documentation of the TruScreen process. Okay. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to order a check, we want to talk about a few issues you may encounter when using TruScreen or doing any of the checks in general. AmeriCorps has issued what they call pre-approved NSCHC waivers, which are put in place where there are factors that make using their vendors impossible. And these waivers allow you as a grantee to comply with the requirements without additional approval in writing from AmeriCorps. And AmeriCorps can add or remove pre-approved waivers at any time, so it's important to check the AmeriCorps NSCHC manual often to ensure you're up to date on any changes. And that manual is on the website we looked at earlier. Once a pre-approved NSCHC waiver has been revoked, it does not apply to any individuals who begin service or work after the expiration date. Okay, so that's important to note. The first one we're going to talk about is related to TruScreen, and it's due to the fact that there are few states and territories for which TruScreen does not provide information. So as of this month, the states and territories which TruScreen does not provide information for are listed on your screen. It's important to note, again, that this list can change at any time, so it's important to check the most recent AmeriCorps pre-approved waivers in the AmeriCorps NSCHC manual, right? So the TruScreen waiver states are California, Delaware, Louisiana, Nevada, New Mexico, Virginia, Massachusetts, Mississippi, New Hampshire, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and Puerto Rico. Okay, so TruScreen cannot get the information for these states and territories. So what does that mean? That means that you will not be required to get a state of service or state of residence check from one of the listed unavailable state or territories if you meet the following criteria. If you obtain an NSOPW check from TruScreen, if you obtain any required state checks that are available from TruScreen, and you conduct an FBI fingerprint check. Well, automatically, you have to do number 3. The only issue could be is if you're doing a combination and you, let's say you only use TruScreen for your state checks and you use the nsopw.gov website for your NSOPW check, that would not be in compliance with this waiver then, because you would have to order the NSOPW from TruScreen. Okay. This pre-approved NSC2 waiver only applies if you meet those 3 conditions. And again, if it's not expired at the time of the check. Okay. Any questions on that one? Type them in the chat if you have any questions or raise your hand. Making sure no one has their hand raised. Y'all are kind of hidden. All right, the second pre-approved NSCH waiver is based on the National Fingerprint File, or NFF. It was mentioned earlier in the chat. The National Fingerprint File is an electronic information sharing system maintained by the FBI, and it allows the FBI and the state to exchange criminal history records for non-criminal justice purposes authorized by federal or state laws, such as background checks. So when a state participates in the NFF system, an FBI fingerprint check is duplicative of the search of a state's criminal history record repository. Therefore, an FBI check eliminates the need for you to conduct duplicative state criminal history record checks in states that participate in the NFF system. So if a required state check, state of service, or state of residence is from a state that participates in the NFF, then you do not need to conduct the check for that state as long as you have an FBI fingerprint check. This list is a lot longer than the last list. So this is the current list of states that participate in the NFF, with Arizona and Delaware being the most recent ones to be added. Okay. I want to backtrack for a second on 2 things. If it is a TruScreen state of residence, you cannot, even if you, let's say you put a state of California order in through TruScreen, it will never come back. It'll be stuck in limbo because they can't get that information. So do not do any of these states or territories, the TruScreen waiver one. If it is an NFF state, you could still order a TruScreen check. You don't have to. So you're probably asking, why would I do it then? An FBI fingerprint check, which we'll go into after the break, only gives you cleared or not cleared and gives you no criminal history check information, period. And that cleared or not cleared is strictly based on AmeriCorps' criteria of murder and sex offender registry. So you're not getting a lot of information. So you could choose for any of these states listed here to still conduct a state of service or state of residence check, because you will get more information on those checks than you will from an FBI check. But it is not required in the lease. You will be fully compliant if you say it's an NFF state and I'm just going to move forward with my fingerprint check. Okay. This is a lot to track. So the best way to track this is AmeriCorps on their website has this document. It's called the NFF TruScreen Waiver Table. Let me pull up exactly where it is. So I'm going to go to the top. This is the National Service Criminal History Check AmeriCorps website page we looked at earlier. And if you scroll down to this NSCHC guidance section, you will see this NFF TruScreen Waiver Table. How many of you all have seen this or used this before? this table. Becca gave it thumbs up. Couple thumbs up there. Great. Okay. Couple of y'all said great. This, if you have not used this before, this should go in your toolbox for sure. Okay. This is a great document. This was last updated on 4/19. If you save it to your computer and you're about to do a bunch of checks, you just want to go back to the website to make sure you have the latest version so you're not running an online check. Tanya says she loves the table, so do I. So this table makes my eyes a little buggy though. So the easiest way to work with this table is this first column, our state of service. So for you all, that is Tennessee. So instead of looking at all of this information, we're just going to choose Tennessee and we can filter it. There's a little arrow by the states listed. And what you're going to do is click on that arrow and then you're going to deselect, select all, and you're just going to scroll down and select Tennessee. So now we just have the Tennessee information. Okay. Again, Tennessee is state of service. Now let's say Tennessee is also state of residence. I'm going to scroll over all these other states here are state of residence, and it tells you what you have to do for Tennessee. So if you're using TrueScreen and FieldPrint, you're going to do TrueScreen NSOPW check and a FieldPrint FBI check because Tennessee is an NFF state, which means the FBI check includes the state check of Tennessee, right? Someone throw me out another state. Just list another state in the chat. Georgia. All right, so let's look at Georgia. Sorry if I'm making y'all dizzy. Georgia is also an NFF state, so it's going to be the same thing. TrueScreen NSOPW and FBI FieldPrint check, right? I see California. I'm going to go to that one because California I know is a little bit different. California is a TrueScreen waiver state. So AmeriCorps has said we cannot get information from California, period. So we are waiving that state. So again, it's just going to be a TrueScreen NSOPW check and an FBI FieldPrint check because you can't get California and Tennessee is an NFF waiver state, right? We'll do one more. We'll do Arkansas. Arkansas is not a TrueScreen waiver state, is not an NFF state. So if you have an individual who resides in Arkansas at the time of their application, you will have to do a TrueScreen NSOPW check, a TrueScreen Arkansas check, and an FBI fingerprint check. Okay, so this table is very helpful. It also has a change log, so it tells you here when any states have been added, which is really good for audit purposes. If you're audited a couple years back and they're like, why didn't you do this check? And it's like, well, because it was different then. Okay. Any questions on that? Go back to our PowerPoint. Okay. All right. So before we dive in how to order a TrueScreen check, we are going to take a 10-minute break. So if we can all be back at 10:01, stretch your legs, do what you need to do, and we'll be back at 10:01.
Thanks, Jennifer. See you guys in 10 minutes.
All right, 10:01. Let's keep going. Okay. So we're going to talk about how to actually order checks in TruScreen. I think this will answer one of the questions from earlier that we had. This is the initial screen that you see when you log into your account. And to place an order, you're just going to click on the plus order button in the top right corner. From there, this will pop up and asking different things. So request client is just going to be your organization. And then you're going to decide on what support level you want, whether that's NSOPW only or NSOPW plus Tennessee or NSOPW plus Arkansas, like we just looked at. If you want, even though Tennessee is an NFF state and you don't have to, if you want to do Tennessee, you can do NSOPW plus Tennessee. And then if you have a state of residence check, this was the question I think from earlier, it doesn't allow you to do like NSOPW plus Tennessee plus Arkansas. What you would have to do is in the special instructions field at the bottom of your screen, you would have to write state of residence check Arkansas. Okay, so you have to indicate what additional second state check you need. All right, unfortunately, they've said they were going to update that so that you could list it as a second state, but right now it's just special instruction. Okay. You're gonna the default services up here is just gonna then indicate what you're ordering. So this check is for an NSOPW only, so that's what it shows. You're gonna have to enter your grant number. Access to vulnerable populations isn't applicable anymore, but it's a required question, so you'll just answer it. You're gonna indicate Tennessee as your sub-grant, and then you're gonna put whether you verified the name documentation. For all of you, this should be yes, period, because you need to take whatever identification that you have, again, probably using that I-9 criteria, and look at it and see the name to be able to type the name in here to order the check. Okay. And then you're going to put their anticipated start date and special instructions. There are two other fields at the very, very bottom called tags and internal comments. Those are not required tags. You could just like add tags for your own internal tracking, like job fair 2024. Okay. And then internal comments are just for organization viewing. If you have different people in here doing different pieces of the check, they could add some internal comments. So, Tanya, were you ordering a state of residence and a state of service check?
We were, and I was just making sure that's what you were saying, because I follow, like, I remember being trained that way, and thankfully, you know, this person was like being onboarded earlier, and I kept checking, and so finally I called TruScreen, and I was like, hey, I ordered their NSOPW check, came back, and I was like, why did you not run the state of residence check? And they were like, you have to choose that state of resident. Like, so I had to do like NSOPW plus Arkansas.
But were you doing NSOPW plus Tennessee already?
I didn't have to do it because I'm in Tennessee. So
you had chosen NSOPW only.
Yeah, because at one point, and you know, like in the training when this was first coming around, it was like, put it in your add what your state of residence is. Before they had all the drop boxes, they were like, put it in the special instructions. You know, like you would choose NSOPW, and then it was like, then in your special instructions, you would say, hey, I need a state of residence check in addition to the NSOPW for this. And at some point, they just stopped following that. And then they did they added where you could have like all these choices where you could do NSOPW only, or you could do like NSOPW plus. And so, but at the time when they switched, there wasn't anything that came out that was like, yo, TrueScreen, you know how it is sometimes, you know, and that's okay. Like, no worries. Like like, thankfully I was able to catch it because I was going back and I was like, wait, what's going on here? And then they were like, oh, we just like updated. And I was like, nice. Okay. I mean, it was good. It's super helpful, but I stay away from special instructions.
So what it should be working now, special instructions would only be if you have to order 2 state checks. So you should do NSOBW plus a state, and then special instructions would be if you were doing like if you were doing NSOBW and state of Tennessee, that would go in the report level, and then a state of residence check for Arkansas would go in the special instructions.
And so you're saying that because like if they weren't going to do field print, because we do TrueScreen and field print, so when we go by the waiver table, it's sort of like our guidance is what you discussed before the break. But I don't know, like
everyone needs an FBI check.
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I'm just saying, like, for us, we're also a fixed amount, fixed award. So, but I also just, anytime you're using that special instructions, and maybe this isn't like my lesson learned was like to follow up and make sure that TrueScreen is.
Yeah. If you have
I just haven't had that, with them on that, but their customer service is on point. I will say that.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a check sitting there for any length of time, I would check in with them on what's happening, period. Because these are all time sensitive for you all and enrolling members. And I was just giving an example, like if you chose to do a state check for state of service, that, and then a secondary state of residence check was required, that's where you would put it there. But you all can choose not to do a state Tennessee check. Okay. Any other questions? Rachel, I'm glad you've never encountered that issue. Yeah, that could be it for sure. Okay. All right. Subject information, again, hyphens and apostrophes matter. For the actual check, capitalization doesn't, because they have you put first name and then reconfirm first name, they will look at capitalization. The capitalization has to match between those 2 fields, but it doesn't matter for the actual check, if that makes sense. I would only do the required fields, save yourself time, like middle name is listed here. Don't bother filling it in. They're not going to use it. They're not going to put it into their check system or anything. So you have to put first name and last name. And again, you want it to match whatever form of name identification you've utilized, exactly as that, hyphens and apostrophes included. You're going to put their email, confirm their email address, and then hit continue. Once you hit continue, you're going to see a summary of the order to verify the information. And if it's correct, you're going to click continue. Otherwise, you're going to click back to correct it. Once you click submit, the applicant receives an email to create an account to complete their portion of the check. I always say it's really important, because these are time sensitive, the more information you can provide to your applicants, the better. So really kind of letting them know this is coming, and I have a sample email you all could use. But it saves you headache and it saves them headache down the line. This isn't, I don't think these instructions are the best here, but this is the email that they get from TrueScreen. They then have to complete identification forms. They have to sign off on agreements and disclosures. They still have to upload a copy of their identification documentation. And then they have to they have the opportunity to disclose murder or registrable sex offenses, which of course are AmeriCorps disqualifying offenses. And they're required to submit a digital signature by using their mouse or finger on a touch screen. Okay. Once that order is placed, you can check on the status of that order. You can move many of these columns around. You can hide some of them. You can add others to look at. When TrueScreen 2.0 came out, there was a lot more flexibility in what you see. You can sort each of these. So it does have a status section. and that status section has a few different statuses available. Complete means TruScreen's finished their adjudication of the check. In process means the check's being conducted by TruScreen. On hold could mean that there's action required from the applicant or from you all. Setup means that TruScreen needs to conduct some internal steps before submitting the check. That usually occurs if there's a second state check done within the order. And problem means that for whatever reason, TruScreen's unable to run the check without further information from you or the individual. All right. They also have a quick view feature, so you can hover over the little eyeball next to the name and it'll pull up their status really quick on the right. You can see what's pending, the percent of progress. So in this example, the forms were requested, so you submitted the order, but the individual has not started filling out those forms. And each step shows a date stamp on it. Once the check is complete, a couple other things. If you look at the individual, if you click to open them, not just the quick view, there are some additional options, including resending the email or changing the email address that was sent to for the member to fill out their forms. You can also upload the document. So again, if they had to upload a document, but if they upload a picture of their dog instead, upload a copy of the document that you used for the name verification. You have that option to do that. Okay. So also, if the individual has a Maine or Wisconsin government issued photo ID, you should not upload it because there's laws in those states against uploading those IDs. So there is a Maine or Wisconsin identification form on the NSCHD website you can utilize. But there's a lot of different options. Like I said, if you're using those I-9 forms, it may not be a state driver's license. They could use their passport, their social security card. There's lots of different forms you can utilize now. When TruScreen completes the order check, they're going to notify you via email. All checks that we discussed, they will appear in the screening report section. And then once they're completed, their status will be completed. All right. To look at a specific individual to adjudicate the checks, you're just going to click on that individual's name and a window is going to pop up. This is where people kind of mess up. A lot of people go straight to adjudicate this case, but the first step has to be view the report. In TruScreen and FieldPrint, you always have to review it first before you adjudicate it, and those are two separate steps. You'll see in the middle there where it says adjudicated pass review, there's a red diamond that says review, and that means that you as a program have not adjudicated this check. Okay, so we're going to first click on view report on that right-hand side, and this is what's going to pop up. Okay, it's important to note that there will be an X in a red circle under review and subject data. Those don't change. This is just a flag TruScreen has put there to remind you to adjudicate the record. Then you're going to see all the checks that were ordered. So for this one, it was a sex offender check and an Alabama check, state of Alabama check, right? You will see green dots. Those green dots don't mean they've fully passed the criminal history check. It means that they've passed AmeriCorps disqualifying offenses, okay? They may not pass your disqualifying offenses. So you have to scroll all the way down to see what the criminal record is. Okay. Very, very important to scroll all the way down on this one. Just make sure they meet your disqualifying offenses. All right. You can also look at it another way. Let me back up. When I say view report, that pulls up all the checks together. Okay. If you scroll down on their name, it lists each check individually. I don't like this because then you have to make sure you check each one individually. I would just do view report, but I just wanted to show you that that is there. Okay. Once after you view the report, then you can adjudicate it. So you're going to go close the view report screen, and you're going to come back to this screen here and click adjudicate this case. All right. When you click adjudicate this case, you'll see the current past review status is listed as review, and you need to select the adjudication status. You're going to either select pass, pre-adverse, or applicant withdrawn. There are a lot of other options because TrueScreen works with many other clients. So, but you should only be doing pass, pre-adverse, or applicant withdrawn. Pre-adverse means the individual does not pass whatever your suitability criteria is, but they are given the opportunity, because it's a name-based check, to challenge the factual accuracy of the information. If you set it up in your initial account setup, TrueScreen will handle that full process for you. Okay. So they will send them a letter telling them the information. They have the option to challenge it. They have so much time to do that. And then TrueScreen will come back to you with the results if the results have changed. And then you will do a final adjudication. If you select pre-adverse, that person cannot start serving. You have not finalized the adjudication of that case. Okay. After you would enter a new pass review status, you also have to enter a case note. And the case note has to include your name or initials, whoever's adjudicating the check, the date, and the status. So Jennifer Cowart, pass 7/10/24. Okay. So those both have to be entered, and then you're going to hit save to exit this section. At the very bottom, you'll see adjudication history, and you'll note that the only history currently is that TrueScreen has completed the case. Right? Once you adjudicate it, and if you go back into it, then you will see that the program has adjudicated it. The review status is passed, and the case note that was entered was there. Okay. Back up here. And then also on their individual page, it'll say pass under the adjudication pass review to show that you have adjudicated it. Right? I'm not, Candace may be able to answer this question. I'm not sure if Tennessee requires you all, I don't think Tennessee requires you all to print the paperwork for the file, but if you do, you'd want to make sure that you print the adjudication showing pass. And you need to make sure when TrueScreen 2.0 came out, it does weird things. It doesn't include the name. So you may have to do like a screenshot showing that all to print, or make sure your printer is set correctly so that the name shows. All right. We talked about that, so we're going to skip that. This is a really important tool, TrueScreen Monitoring Report. How many of you all pull this report? I'll let you answer in the chat while I continue talking so we make sure we have enough time. If you don't pull this report as part of your like audit process to make sure you do this, then you should be. So I was a program director for TrueScreen and FieldPrint were there, but all my checks were done by my admin assistant. And then I would always double check those about 2 weeks before members were enrolled. And that way we caught errors before they started that we could fix. You all should be doing the same thing. And it's easy to do with this report. This is the report the commission pulls, AmeriCorps pulls. So if you just go under the reporting tab and click CNCS monitoring report, it's going to have you enter a few parameters. And I'm excited that you all don't know about this, because this is a good thing for your toolbox. You're going to enter some parameters like date in there, date parameters, and then it's going to pull an Excel sheet. It's a long Excel sheet. So this is kind of the first half, and this includes like stuff that was created when you set up your account, such as, and I skipped a slide, there we go, such as your program name, your EIN number, your DUNS number, all of those things. The case number is the unique number assigned to an individual, and the division number is the unique number assigned to your grantee agreement, okay? The second page of this, and it's all gonna be on one long sheet, but like kind of like the second half of this is the important part. This shows information you entered. So the first line, actually all lines, did an NSOBW and state of Washington check. The second one had a state of residence check for Texas, all right? you'll see the date that the check was ordered under request date, and date of application submittal is the date that the applicant signed their consent forms. So that very first check, if the member has started, is not in compliance because they didn't even sign consent forms. So no check was actually ever conducted. Okay. We're going to go down to that last check there at the bottom of the 4. And you'll notice criminal history check delivered past review, NSOPW past review. They both say pass. Those are TruScreen's adjudication. Okay, that's what TruScreen has adjudicated based on AmeriCorps' criteria. The important piece is the adjudicated result column. And this says review. This means you have not, your program has not adjudicated this member. Additionally, last adjudicated will be blank. Okay, so if your members have started and you pull this report and it shows that last line, you are out of compliance because they do not have an adjudicated check. Okay, so this is a great way to double check that you've spelled names correctly, that you've ordered the correct checks, and that you've adjudicated them. So I strongly suggest you all utilize this report going forward. Common issues that happen with TruScreen is the program does not adjudicate the check, the first and last name on the identification does not match the check, an incorrect check or state was ordered, and the grant number or other program information is not accurate. All right. Any questions on TruScreen before we move to FieldPrint? I know Suzanne Candace is checking on your question for you. Okay. All right. Let's touch base on TruScreen or FieldPrint, excuse me. FieldPrint's shorter than TruScreen, I promise. So FieldPrint is the approved vendor for the FBI fingerprint checks. And again, you'll want to make sure that it's under the AmeriCorps agreement your account is. FieldPrint documents some things, not as much as TruScreen. It documents the individual's consent to perform the check, the notice to the individual that selection to serve or work is based on the criminal history check result, notice to them of reasonable opportunity to review and challenge the accuracy of the result before actions taken to exclude them, as a final adjudication decision, and then timestamp documentation of that adjudication. Okay, FieldPrint does not review, document review of the individual's identification because it is a fingerprint check. Okay, this process again is super applicant driven. You're going to provide your fingerprint code to the individual, and this code you received when you set up the account, and then the individual has to go in and sign up, create an account, complete their identifying information, sign agreements, and set up an appointment for a live scan. All right. Some of you, how many of you have to utilize fingerprint cards because there's not a live scan option near you? Anyone? Okay. If there is not a live scan option near you, like I've had more rural programs that the members would have to travel like 2 hours, I've had actually programs become their own live scan spot to do fingerprints. Now they have to open it to the general public. There's not many people that come in from the general public to get their fingerprints done, but it is an option. If the members are more than 35 miles from a FieldPrint live scan location, you can get their fingerprint cards. It is more complicated. It does take longer. That card is coded to that specific individual. So you can't change the card. You can't have someone else's fingerprints. You can't duplicate it, nothing like that. Okay. Or else you're going to have to start over. AmeriCorps nor FieldPrint can release criminal history information obtained from the FBI. FieldPrint reviews the criminal history based on the AmeriCorps eligibility criteria, and it is strictly cleared or not cleared. All right, cleared, just to make this fun and very clear to everyone, cleared does not mean that an individual, basically cleared means that an individual's criminal history record did not indicate that the individual has been convicted of murder or required to or listed on a sex offender registry. However, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're eligible to serve, okay? Because again, it's just looking at AmeriCorps criteria and not your criteria, all right? And similarly, not clear doesn't mean they're ineligible. Ashley, I'm sorry, your organization won't sign up. If they do decide to change their mind, I have a contact at Fieldprint that's worked with one of the organizations I've assisted, and the contact's been really great in helping them set up their own live scan. All right. So what I said probably wasn't clear at all. We'll just keep saying that. So why an individual would receive a not cleared status could be that they were convicted of murder, or they're required to register as a sex offender. State laws vary regarding sex offender registry requirements, which can require sex offender registration for individuals who've been convicted of other crimes that could involve a sex offense or a crime of neglect, cruelty, or endangerment. Okay, this would be why they would receive a not cleared potentially. And the third reason is the FBI criminal history record contains a charge for either murder or a crime that may involve a sex offense or a crime of neglect, cruelty, or endangerment without any disposition. No clear indication that the individual is not convicted of that charge. Yes, Rachel. Rachel says that they still do a state of service check via TruScreen and NSWW have further context should there be a record. Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying before. Tennessee is an NFF state, so you don't have to, but it can provide further information. Okay. A not cleared recommendation could mean that the FBI history record indicate contains a factual error. It could mean that the individual may have been convicted of an offense that relates to a sex offense or a crime of neglect, cruelty, or endangerment, but is not required to register as a sex offender. Or it could mean that the FBI criminal history record contains a charge for a potentially disqualified offense, again, without a clear disposition. Even though these individuals are marked not cleared, they could still be eligible to serve or work. All right, just to make it fun and exciting for all of you as program staff. So if an individual receives a not cleared, they have the right to challenge the recommendation, right? What AmeriCorps suggests is that you allow 45 calendar days for an individual to challenge the factual accuracy, that you work with them to discuss and document what may have caused them to receive a not cleared recommendation. The steps they will need to take will vary based on the specific reason they obtained a not cleared. And the individuals whose FBI criminal history record contains erroneous information, including offenses that have been expunged, has to demonstrate to you that the record's erroneous, right? What the individual has to do is they have to order a copy of their own FBI check record in order to prove to you that they should have a cleared status, right? If they had a not cleared status and you intend to select them, then you have to have dated copies of the not cleared recommendation, evidence you used in making the eligibility criteria, and a contemporaneously dated memo to the file documenting the determination of their eligibility. If the individual does not contact you to challenge the results, then you can proceed with making the selection based on the not cleared recommendation and the results of the other NSCHC components. And you should not select someone who's received a not cleared unless they satisfactorily challenge the results. I was working with had a commission call to ask me some questions. They had a program that had an individual not cleared, and they said that the member came with a charge, like an arrest record showing that the charge had been dropped, but the member did not pull their full FBI record. They had just went to like one police station and done that. So the program selected that individual, and come to find out later, the individual had had multiple arrests and multiple convictions that the program was not aware of, which is why they had the not cleared recommendation to begin with, including conviction for offenses that would not have them eligible based on that program's suitability criteria. So it's very important that you get the full record for these individuals. All right, so let's talk about if you are a brand new program and just set up TrueScreen or FieldPrint account, it's super duper important that you make sure you have both a My Fingerprints module and a My Fitness Determination. I've seen this happen with a handful of programs where they're only getting My Fitness Determination and they're not getting the My Fingerprints module when FieldPrint sets them up. So just make sure you have both if you're a brand new program with new accounts. All right, because it's FBI information, you cannot change it or modify it. We have to do a little bit of back and forth here. So again, we always have to review the record first. So you're going to start in the My Fitness Determination, and you're going to click on that individual you want to look at. And you'll see under Fitness Determination, it's going to say cleared or not cleared. That is FieldPrint adjudication only. Okay. You'll also see fields at the top that say Fitness Determination Viewed By and Viewed Fitness Determination Date. Those fields will auto-populate once you close this screen, okay? Because you're now looking at the fitness determination. At the bottom of this document, it shows you the consent forms, okay? And it also shows you when the adjudication results were received, when they were fingerprinted, all of those pieces. So you're going to view the results. This individual was cleared. You're going to close that screen. It was a pop-up. And then you're going to come back to here and you're going to click on the same individual in My Fingerprints. Once you click on the same individual in My Fingerprints, this is what it looks like. Okay. You're going to select pass or fail. If they had a not cleared, you're not going to be able to check anything because they have to have the right to challenge those results. So you can't check anything at this point. If they had it cleared then you can just hit pass and save, okay? You will not be able to do an adjudication for those individuals not cleared until that challenge period has been completed. And let's say it was 45 days, you didn't hear from them, then you can come in and click fail and save that, right? You'll see that the fitness determination date and viewed by are now filled in. And there's also a grantee adjudication date and a name field there also. Again, those will be auto-populated once you close this pop-up, okay? Once you do that, then the third step is to go back to My Fitness Determination and pull it up. And I don't have a slide for that. I'm sorry. Once you go back there, it'll be this same thing. It'll just be fully, actually it'll be, I'm sorry, let's go back. It'll be this, but all the dates and everything and all the individual names will be filled in. Okay. If you have to print it out, this is the document you would print out. Okay. So you would print this out from the My Fitness Determination once you've adjudicated it. And Candace will come back with that information for you all. Okay. All right. Just like TrueScreen, FieldPrint also has a report. So you should be pulling this report too. It's under My Tools and it's called TCN Status Report. Again, it's going to pull up an Excel file for you to look at. So if we look at this report here, you'll see there's a grantee viewed fitness determination field and who viewed it, and then adjudication decision field and the date of that and who the adjudication decision was by. So for Mickey Volunteer, the very first one, the issue is that the check has not been adjudicated. So if the member started, you have a non-adjudicated check, and so there's an issue. The second person, you adjudicated the check, but you never viewed the decision, okay? So that's a problem. Again, you always have to review it and then adjudicate it. The third one, nothing's been done. The fourth one, you adjudicated the check on 2/6, but you viewed the fitness determination on 2/9. So you, again, viewed it after you adjudicated it. So you'd have to re-adjudicate it to be able to have that date after your viewing time. And you'll see the last one had a not cleared status. And the fitness determination was viewed on 2/6. And there's an applicant challenge it on 2/18. and then you made an adjudication decision on 222. This is not necessarily incorrect or would be a cost finding. It would red flag though for me because they challenged it on 218 and 4 days later you made a decision. That's a very quick turnaround to get an FBI record and to make that decision. Okay. Some common issues for FieldPrint, including not documenting adjudication or review of result, not documenting resolution of not cleared adjudication recommendation if the individual is eligible to serve. Okay, any questions on FieldPrint? Like I said, it's quicker than TrueScreen. Okay. There are changes coming, as always, right? There's not a ton of information out. What is going to happen, what I am aware is going to happen, is TrueScreen will be embedded, or sorry, FieldPrint, let me start over. FieldPrint will be embedded into TrueScreen, okay? So at a certain point in time, what we've been told is as of October 1st, you will no longer use FieldPrint and log into FieldPrint separately. It will be embedded in TrueScreen. So the FieldPrint consent forms will be in there. The individual members will get an individual code. They will no longer use your program code. As they're going through the consent forms, they will get an individual code that will take them to the FieldPrint scheduling website, just like it is now. Okay. And then your FieldPrint results will come in with your TrueScreen results, whatever you've ordered, and you will adjudicate them all together. Okay. So as of right now, and this has been delayed once already, this transition should have started occurring in May and June with training. We've been told it's being pushed to August. There's a lot of changes happening at AmeriCorps in terms of this and eGrants. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's pushed again. But in August, supposedly AmeriCorps is going to train programs on these changes, and you'll have to sign new agreements because FieldPrint is going into TrueScreen. Then as of October 1st, all FieldPrint checks would be ordered through TrueScreen, and you would order no new FieldPrint checks through the current system. Okay. And then as of December 31st, the My Fingerprints module where you adjudicate checks would no longer be accessible. So any checks you ordered before October 1st would have to be adjudicated by December 31st. And then you will still have access to previous records for 7 years from when the check was completed. So that takes us through 2031. Okay. I wouldn't worry about this now. I'm just giving you a heads up because you may have heard some things. But there should be training down the line. Okay. Any questions on TrueScreen or FieldPrint? All right. I know most of you said that you utilize TrueScreen and FieldPrint, but in case someone uses one of the other systems and views this recording, I'm just going to go through them very quickly. Okay. If you choose to use the nsopw.gov website, it is a public website. It is free, so you don't have to have the individual's consent prior to conducting this check. All right, but you have to have their identification to ensure that you're checking the correct name. Again, this check must be adjudicated at least 1 day prior to start of service or work. Okay, you're going to go to the nsopw.gov website, and you're only going to search by name, first and last name. Do not search by location. It will limit the results and be a cost finding because it will be considered a non-compliant check. So only do it by first and last name. Once you type in their first and last name, it'll have you verify you're a human, and then it'll conduct the check. So this check is for Jeff Smith. So we have a lot of results. We have 128 results. And actually, I'm going to give me 1 sec, y'all. I'm going to actually pull up this really quick to show you what I'm talking about because I think it translates easier. Well, let's see. There we go. So if we do Jeff Smith, give it a second to load, you're going to see a ton of results. And you have to adjudicate each one of these results. So, and what I mean by adjudicate each one of these results, we'll wait for that to come up, is you have to go through and show how each of these individual is not your individual. So, for instance, show that this individual is deceased. It says deceased and put your initials, okay? Show that this individual is because of the age or the race. And you'll notice that some of these have very little information. So I want to talk through those really quick. And it's taking a long time today, of course. There we go. All right. So as of right now, we have 145. So I want to scroll down. A lot of these you can tell, like this one is incarcerated, this individual, so you can look there. But I want to see. Going to make me right here. Jeffrey Scott. There's not much information here to be able to make an adjudication. So you will have to click on him and it's going to pull up the actual state. I did what you asked. There we go. Okay. So now you can see his information and you can make a determination like race is different or age or whatever it is to show that he's not your candidate. Okay. So it's important that you adjudicate all of those checks. Okay. Additionally, let me go back to our PowerPoint. There we go. You need to make sure that all jurisdictions and territories are reporting. This check right here shows that West Virginia was not reporting, so it's a non-compliant check. This is important to do the checks if you're using nsopw.gov like a couple weeks ahead of time in case the database is down. Usually they come up really quickly again, but not always. So all jurisdictions have to be reporting in order for it to be a compliant check, right? If you are doing state of residence and state of service checks and FBI checks, not through TruScreen and FieldPrint, then you have to use the AmeriCorps designated repositories. And that list, you have to use the specific list is, you find it right here. It's in this manual here, and it's listed, let me see where it is. The full list is here. So you can only use these designated repositories. So I suggest always using TruScreen for state checks because this is a pain if you have to go through multiple states and figure out their process and make sure you're doing it correctly. But you do have the option, okay? The process and results are going to vary by state and territory. You have to ensure that you follow the various state processes and laws. So it could be a fingerprint-based search using biometric data. It could be a name-based search using biographic information or other check option beyond fingerprint or name-based. It's going to, like I said, vary from state to state. Do not select checks that are limited by time, criminal sentence. The check has to include all data that dates back as far as the approved source provides criminal history information. Okay, you're going to have to review and adjudicate all the results, just like with the nsopw.gov website. Adjudication has to be documented and placed in the individual's file or a separate criminal history check file based on the repository regulations. You have to understand the repository screening criteria and ensure it includes AmeriCorps disqualifying offenses. And you have to retain the date stamped results and documentation that you adjudicated the results, even if there are no hits or results provided. All right. Oh, I skipped a bunch there. Give me 1 second. All right. Some states only release a rap sheet listing all offenses and arrests, while others could provide a record summary, kind of like the FBI cleared or not cleared. So that's why it's important to understand their screening criteria. And then if you choose not to utilize FieldPrint to conduct the FBI fingerprint checks, then you have to utilize the AmeriCorps designated state repository and designated alternatives to state repository. Most of those can provide FBI fingerprint checks. And just like field print, they will most likely just do a cleared or not cleared. So you need to ensure that you understand their criteria that they are making that on. Field print does it strictly on AmeriCorps criteria, but these states that you're ordering separately would not do it that way. So you have to understand what their cleared or not cleared means. Okay. Again, you're going to have to make sure that you retain the date stamp results and documentation, that you adjudicated the results, even if there were no results provided. All right, so just a quick summary. NSOPW can be done through TrueScreen or nsopw.gov, state of service and state of residence if required, TrueScreen and AmeriCorps date or AmeriCorps designated state repository. And then your FBI fingerprint check can be done through field print or the AmeriCorps designated state repository. No matter what system you utilize, all checks have to be completed and adjudicated at least 1 day prior to start of service or work. All right, any questions before we move into best practices and kind of wrap things up for this morning? All right. So let's talk about some best practices. The first one is that NFF TrueScreen waiver table, the Excel sheet that I showed you earlier, this one. Very good practice to utilize this to make sure that you're doing the correct checks. A second one is NSCHC tracking. I'm a huge fan of Excel. I know not everyone likes Excel, but I used to do all my member tracking in Excel. You could use whatever system works for you, but have some way to track it. I don't want to have to go into every single member file to look at it. So I created an Excel sheet that I knew where everyone was. So like I said, my admin did all the checks. And then when I double checked them before they started, I would fill in this worksheet so I knew the status of everyone. If there was a blank, then I knew something had to be corrected or wasn't done, and we needed to follow up as soon as possible. So like the top one is for TrueScreen and field print, shows the enrollment date, the date we verified the identification. So we looked at it to make sure we have the name correct. The date the NSOPW, what was adjudicated, their application state, the date state of service was adjudicated, whether a state of residence was required, and then the state that FBI fingerprint check was completed and adjudicated. These are just templates. You can certainly make them your own. At the bottom of the screen is if you're using NSOPW and the designated state repositories, kind of the same thing, just to show. Tanya, I am the same way. I love spreadsheets. And then the third best practice is self-audit. Self-audits are really important. Like I've been talking about, more than one individual should be verifying the checks were completed and adjudicated correctly. We are all human and we all make mistakes, and it's less likely that a mistake will not be caught will be caught if you have more than one individual looking at these and verifying they were done correctly. If a non-compliant check is found, you should notify Volunteer Tennessee staff as soon as possible. Mary, also the second thing you should do is run that compliant check ASAP. So if you find an error and someone's already started, run the check that was incorrect ASAP so that that clock stops, because AmeriCorps can go back, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. AmeriCorps can go back and collect up to 6 months of their living allowance in FICA, or even past 6 months. They usually limit it to 6 months. Okay, so if you are a cost reimbursement grantee and have a mistake, the salary, stipend, living allowance, and FICA during the period of non-compliance will be disallowed. Okay, if you're fixed amount, a share of the cost per MSY proportional to the period of non-compliance for which costs are disallowed for members will have to be paid back. If you have extensive issues, then they can put a manual hold. The Volunteer Tennessee could hold your reimbursement. You could have your grant suspended or terminated. These are extensive issues, not like kind of one or two here or there. AmeriCorps does have an NSCHC enforcement procedural guide, which provides more information. But just to kind of look through here. So here's kind of an example. The first line, Joseph Aguilar, his enrollment date was 9/5, but his TrueScreen was not adjudicated till 9/8. His field print was adjudicated on time by 8/31, which is before his enrollment date. So 3 days he was out of compliance for TrueScreen. So prorating the living allowance for those 3 days, and FICA was $200. So the program owes $200. Okay. If you look at Wonder Woman at the bottom, there was never an adjudicated field print check. The member started on 9/5 and we're already to December, let's say. So you have to take the FICA and living allowance for those 4 months, and it's $7,400. Okay. So this is where it can add up really quickly. So it's important, like I said, to have those audits and those checks and balances in place. All of you are required, per the AmeriCorps grant terms and conditions, to have at least one person take the annual online training course in Litmus. It's a very high level course with the regulations. Along with consulting, I'm also one of the managing partners of On3Learn, and one of my co-partners will be presenting to you all after lunch. But On3Learn also has an NSCHC course, which is much more comprehensive and goes into screenshots and TrueScreen and field print, similar to what I've presented to you today. I always say that more than one individual should be taking the Litmus course, because in case that individual leaves, then you're no longer in compliance with the terms and conditions, and it's always good to have more than one person who understands the criminal history check. Okay. Let's wrap up with a couple FAQs. So if you have an incoming member and they served in another AmeriCorps program, so let's say they served in Candace's program and they're coming to my program, and they haven't had a break in service of more than 180 calendar days, do you need to conduct a new NSCHC? And the answer is yes. When someone leaves one AmeriCorps program and begins serving in another one, they have to conduct a new NSCHC, even if they start, like they end one program today and start another one tomorrow. Okay. Now, if they are staying in my program, right, they've served a year in my program, they're staying in my program, the break has not been more than 180 days, I do not have to conduct another check. What I would do is, if the commission requires documentation in the member file, I would take my documentation from this program year, copy it, put it in next year's file, highlight right at the top, original and 23-24 member file, highlight it in yellow, so that if I leave, someone doesn't come in and say, why are there no criminal history check information in this member file? Okay, it's clear that they were a carryover from the previous year. All right, how far in advance of participating in a program can you conduct the NSCHC? AmeriCorps says from the point of application. So we used to start recruiting in January, February for September start. So I could run in February like NSOPW and a TrueScreen state of service check if I wanted to, and I might hold off on the FBI check closer to their enrollment date because it's more expensive in case they decide not to go with the program or something. But there is no date as far as how far ahead you can do. You just want to think about due diligence, and that if you do it super far ahead, they could have an arrest and conviction in that time period, okay, before they start service. And then next is, our program is allowed to use current year grant funds to pay criminal history NSCHC costs for members enrolled in next. And this is the only thing you can do that for. So you can take this year's grant funds and pay for next year's members' criminal history checks. And that's because if you wait until your future budget starts, then the check is not an option, and incurring the cost today and postponing it, you don't want to do that. So you can't incur the cost today for your future grant unless you had a pre-award cost agreement. So you can use your current grant budgets for next year's members only in relation to criminal history checks, only in relation to criminal history checks. Okay. And then the last one is about charging applicants for the cost of conducting the criminal history check. You cannot charge them, okay? If they have to pay for anything out of pocket, like an FBI fingerprint check through a state repository, you would have to reimburse them, and that should be part of your policies and procedures, how that reimbursement goes. Okay. Candace has put a link to Basecamp where there are tons of resources I provided. So I'm just going to circle back to the On3Learn NSCHC course. You have that available for free for you, and any On3Learn courses are available for all your stakeholders for free. Tennessee pays for the subscription. My 2 spreadsheets I just showed you for tracking NSCHC are in there. The NSCHC sample disqualification chart I showed you is in there. There is this email. Let me pull this up. I have it open, but I have lots open. There you go. There's this email that you can send to applicants if you're using TrueScreen and FieldPrint, and it just walks them through the process. As I said, the more information you can provide to them, the better it is. It makes your life easier and their life easier. So it walks through, here's how you do FieldPrint. Here's how you do TrueScreen. Okay, so feel free to, again, these are templates and samples, make them your own. And then the One Star Commission is the Texas State Commission, and they have a lot of different resources available on their website. You can go and look their website, that it's great to look at. They have a policy and procedures checklist. They have an NSCHC verification form. I would say you probably don't need to use that unless you're using nsopw.gov and their repositories. They have an under 18 form. So if you're not doing a check because someone's under 18, when they start service, this is just a form saying, hey, we're not doing this check because they're under 18. And then they have a FieldPrint not cleared memo. So the individual is not cleared, they challenge, this was our final disposition kind of thing. All right. Any questions on that? Here's my contact information if you have any questions. Jen said she uses the verification form for backup and double check. Yeah, if you're using it, the only caution with the verification form is that it has to match what you're verifying it against, or else it could be a monitoring finding. So you just want to make sure. Sometimes it's better not, you could use it as backup and double check and not put it in the member file, because anything in the member file is auditable. So just be careful if you are using it that it does match the other information you're collecting. Otherwise, you could still use it and maybe not put it in their member file. All right.
One quick clarification question.
Sure.
So for people that start mid-August and our grant starts August 1st, if we are doing background checks for them now, we need to put the previous grant information in for field or for TrueScreen, not the upcoming grant number.
No, you should put you should put the upcoming grant number. I'm just saying in your budget, it can be charged to the current grant year's budget.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? All right. Well, I hope you guys have a good lunch. I will see you after the On3Learn presentation for this afternoon. Oh, Candace, you're muted. We still can't hear you. I'm muted too. All right, we'll see everyone back at 1 o'clock with the On3Learn presentation. Have a great lunch. You may have to restart your computer. Oh, try again, Candace. Oh, yeah, probably have to restart your computer. Okay. See you later.